famous artist. Now keep this in mind, that Picasso, born in 1881, lived in the same period that Vincent van Gogh was alive. Vincent van Gogh died in 1889. Do you think perhaps he knew about Vincent van Gogh? I think so. Especially if he knew about Gauguin. Paul Gauguin died in 1903, whilst Picasso was in Paris. Have you ever heard of Henri Matisse? Henri Matisse and Picasso, together as friends, frequented at the house of Gertrude Stein, a well-known, famous American avant-garde author and writer. My point is, all of these people in the same period whilst he was there. And then his friend Casa Hymas in 1903 shot himself in a restaurant in front of everyone having dinner, when a girl that he was pursuing, a lady that he was pursuing, said to him, "I'm not interested, I'm in love with someone else," and he shot himself in front of everyone right there. Tragic, a terrible scene to live through. It upset Picasso. But what's interesting, also in 1903, Paul Gauguin, one of the possible artists that he looked up to, also passed away. So you can see the connection. And all of a sudden, in 1903, we see this blue period, dark, somber, sad, depressing artworks coming through. Look at this. He paints a lady. This artwork's called Celestina, missing an eye in the center of the artwork, specifically to bring your focal point to her. He paints this over here. Couples, it looks as if they're missing someone. It looks like they've just lost a loved one. We look at the next artworks. This artwork over here is called, guess what? The Tragedy. Every other artwork that you've seen in art galleries and you own is called Beautiful Blue Ocean, The Loving Family, Passionate Night, whatever you want to think about. But no, it's like a scary movie this summer. The Tragedy by Picasso. You know, book your tickets now. And you would think, you don't call an artwork The Tragedy. This shows you the dull period that he'd gone through, the sad period he'd gone through. He created this artwork of the old guitarist, which was a self-portrait of himself. Keeping in mind the previous self-portraits we've seen at the age of 15, at the age of 18, he showed himself as someone of stature. He showed him as someone who was proud of him as an individual. And here he paints himself as someone sitting barefoot, crossed legs, on the raw cement or ground, raw earth, guitar playing, looked down. He looks like someone who's at the end of his life, who doesn't want to be anymore. Interesting, right? But what we find is this artwork actually inspired a poem by a famous poet called Stephen Wallace. It goes as follows. They said, "You have a blue guitar. You do not play things as they are." The man replied, "Things as they are changed upon the blue guitar." Now take the poem as you wish. For me, what's important here is the fact that when you have an artist who creates an artwork that then further goes and inspires another art form in the style of writing, poetry, that is what sets this artist apart. Interesting fact, this artwork we're looking at here is only about 4 inches tall, and you can find it in a museum in California. The name of the museum goes beyond me, but it's in a museum in California. And just for a matter of interest, the art people in the world out there, placed that artwork in an ultraviolet scanner, and they were able to see what's behind it, which shows us that at this period he was painting over canvases if he weren't happy with it, because he was still earning so little money at the time that he was saving money to not buy a new canvas. Just interesting information for you. We're going to move on to the next screen, because the following period here is the Rose period. And what we see is he painted in this beautiful pink tones. I like calling it the Valentine's period, because it's also a period where he painted harlequins and singers and actors and street performers. And we think that there's a possibility he fell in love with a beautiful lady. And we know that Picasso was quite the ladies' man back in the day, right? Everyone knows that. Picasso ending up having multiple different children with different wives, different relationships over his entire life. And that was just Picasso for you. I don't want to get talking into the details of that. But the point is, this was important, because if he hadn't possibly fallen in love with someone in this period, he wouldn't have come out of this dull period we see over here. But we see how it developed him into the next style. What is interesting, at this point in time, we see this artwork created here of Gertrude Stein. I mentioned her earlier, just a few minutes ago. Now Gertrude Stein, avant-garde artist, writer, poet and author, she lived from America, from the United States, she lived in Paris, and she was like an artist mother. And I can just imagine these artists, young artists, specifically Picasso and specifically Matisse, frequenting at a house on a Sunday, having left their families, they've now become the new artist family, if you'd like, and Gertrude saying to them, you know what, that's terrible. Matisse, I think you've done the same old boring thing forever, just like everyone else, and Picasso, you're doing the same old thing like Auguste Renoir is doing. Who are you and where's your signature and your artwork? Now, if you join us for the auctions, you'll always hear me say the following thing. I've got this saying, I'm quite proud of it. I call it, I said, goes for it. The artist's signature is not in their autograph. The signature of the artwork is in the line work and the color, so that when you look at it, you distinctively and immediately knows that is a Picasso, or that is a Dali, or that is a Peter Max, or whatever the case may be, right? How many of you have walked into a gallery yesterday? Beautiful art galleries. Anyone seen the art galleries yesterday? How many of you walked into a gallery and you could immediately say, that's a Picasso? There were a lot of Picasso artworks outside, okay? And you could just immediately see that was a Dali. That's the signature of the artist. And she was inspiring to create their own signature, because these young artists haven't found their feet yet in the world of art. They're making money, but they didn't have a distinctive name. So he created this artwork of Gertrude Stein. He placed it in her living room. She loved it, but she said, I loved it, but I don't like it all that much because you're telling me, look at my face, I look upset, I look angry. And he said to her, well, you actually look like that, to be honest. And because she came across as very, very, very short and very abrupt, and she wasn't the friendliest person. That was a trademark in a way. But what's interesting is, I want to bring your attention now to this. Look at her face. Can you see it looks almost as if he's placed one of those, like a theatre mask, almost. Like little white masks that you get, you know. Placed a mask on it. Very stern. But what's interesting is, thank you very much, what's interesting is how the very next period after this leads into the African period, also known as primitivism. Remember I spoke about Henri Matisse? Henri Matisse went traveling and brought back a postcard of African masks, and it intrigued Picasso. But remember I spoke about Paul Gauguin earlier? Paul Gauguin had quite the affinity to paint artworks of the African people, and he did a trip to Madagascar, which is a country, big island, just off the coast of Mozambique, right next to South Africa. And he went there and he came back creating artworks of the African people. One of which of those artworks is listed today in one of the top 10 most artworks ever sold in history, and it's sold for $198 million US dollars. 198 million, just to put that in perspective. Anyway, so we can see how he's inspired by Gauguin's imagery and bringing back these African mask images, painting them, and this comes to this. But this was a very important season for Picasso, because the very next season after this is Cubism. Now the way Picasso described, let me first tell you what you're looking at. We can't just say Picasso was the only person. It was founded alongside George Braque. George Braque, very famous artist back in the day. But Picasso, certainly the one who took the flag and ran with it, because today when we think Cubism, we automatically think Picasso. He's the one that really ran with it. It's based on monochromatic colors and the grisaille technique. So the grisaille technique really is, it's a word that means grisaille, gris in French, sorry, in Spanish, pardon me, which means gray. So this gray technique, I've used just blue, just for this screen slide for you. Different shades and tones of a similar color scheme. So only blues, but he's only used grays. So but we see a bit of a theme. In the Valentine or in the Rose period, we see similar shades, the same color scheme, right? But in this case, it would have been gray. Okay, now what's grisaille technique? Let's say you want to sketch me in that technique. It's almost like a pointism, if you know, taking a point, many little points, like a paint by numbers, you know, where you draw line number 1 to number 2 to number 3 until but instead of doing it with 50 points, you have maybe 500 or 600 or 1,000 points you have to connect. Very detailed, but very softly done to give an outline effect. In this monochromatic color technique, add it all together, and the result is he explains it this way. The viewer sees a painting in different parts, one fragment at a time. For example, the head, but not the body. If it's a portrait, or the eyes, but not the nose or the mouth. Consequently, everything is always just right. Here's the thing, to me, that's quite important. Let me explain that to you, because even that's a bit of a mouthful to try and understand, all right? Especially if you haven't had your coffee yet. Let me do it for you. If Picasso were to sketch or paint me, Cubist style, the result of it is you would see me two-dimensionally, a flat image, but you will see every angle of me. Left, the right, the top, the bottom, the front, the back, every different image. That's the whole idea in one picture. That's Cubism. Now, if you still don't understand it, another way to explain it to you is Picasso once said, well, take a vase. Smash the vase to pieces. Take all of those broken shards of glass or ceramic and glue it onto a canvas two-dimensionally. It's still the same vase, though, isn't it? It's just not in the same shape and form, but you're looking at the same item. It just looks differently. It's interesting, though, that did you know, because of that viewpoint, how Picasso's trying to say, look at things differently for what they actually are, he became the number one person on the watch list of the Nazis in occupied Paris back in the day because of that viewpoint. Did you realize that? Are we going to get back on that topic? I'm trying to build a whole career here for you, the life of Picasso. Now, if you still don't understand Cubism, let's talk about a shoebox. Imagine a shoebox. How many sides does a shoebox have? 6, right? 6 sides. If you paint each color a different side, you now have 6 different colors. If you now paint each of those sides a different shade, you end up with 12 different colors or 12 different shades. When was the last time you thought of a shoebox like that? Here's how Picasso sees it. Let that settle in for a moment. That's Cubism. See something in a different way with the potential that it may have, or look for the message within it. That's why Picasso was ridiculed and said to be, the Nazis put him on the #1 watch list. Neoclassical and Surrealist period, 1919-1925. He said, I'm going to go back from France, I'm going to travel a bit. At this point, he's making some money, he's got a bit of a name for himself. I want to travel. And for 6 years, he loved going to Naples, Italy. Anyone ever been to Naples? Okay, I'm going to take a guess here. I'm a good mind reader. How many people have been to Naples and Italy? Or if I'm going to just see, just 2 people, is that it? No more, I thought so, yeah. I'm a mind reader. I'm going to guess that someone in this room have also been to Pompeii. Yes, you see, I'm a good mind reader, okay? Okay. We can almost assume if you go to Naples, for sure the first place you're going to go and see after having a pizza is Pompeii. By the way, those of you, anyone who's never been to Naples, who's planning on going on a cruise to Italy, anyone planning on doing that? I want to make a recommendation. Go to Pompeii, don't do the 4 or 5 hour tour of Pompeii. Number one, your legs are going to hate you for it because you are going to walk miles and miles and miles. Just do the 1 hour or 2 hour, and then you go to the what is it called? I'll think of the name in a second. There's another museum, come to me, it's my tongue, in Naples. As you leave the ship, you're probably going to go to the ship, you just walk all the way up, and it's the museum, I'll give the name to you afterwards, and there's a museum that carries every single of the artifacts that was inside Pompeii. It's inside that museum, and to me that's more valuable than looking at broken walls. That's half, we've all seen one. You could only spend 1 hour, then you go there. That's my recommendation for everyone else. It's bothering me, I don't think of the name. Can you remember the name that I mentioned last auction, or last cruise? Remember? Anyway, I'll think of it in a second. Very important for you to go and do that. And then also go and do the underground. Just search Naples Underground. It's not going to bring up a train, I promise you, although they've got underground trains, they have, and it's not catacombs, it's a big difference. You walk underground in very narrow passages, which from the city, where there was an underground city back in the day, where they would feed water to the rich and the wealthy upstairs, and some of the average Joe people would have lived downstairs. Go and have a look at that. Okay. Let's get back to Picasso. Now, art can be categorized, in my opinion, before 1907 and post 1907 because of one particular artwork, the one that I showed you earlier on. But let's tell you why and when. I'm going to stop talking about Picasso and I'm going to talk about Matisse because this is very important. Matisse, in my opinion, played a very big role in the development in the career, or shall I say, the push that Picasso may have needed to really go crazy and think out of the box in order to remain to be the number one. Now what happened 1903, 1904, Matisse painted artworks this style. So we're going back to the early days in Paris, in the house of Gertrude Stein. Matisse created artworks this style. I can just imagine Gertrude Stein saying to him, you know what, everyone does that. That's not anything special. You're good at what you do. You're the best at what you do in that style, but everyone does that. That's not going to cement your name for future generations to come. So he said, okay, I'm going to do something different. I'm still going to paint in the style of post-impressionist. You remember, even Picasso at this point was a post-impressionist. And Matisse said, I'm going to create what looks like a church building here and a field in the background in this weird and obscure color palette. What he did is, he'd gone as far as creating a portrait of his wife in that color palette, hung it in an art exhibition in the Library of Paris, which is a museum in Paris, and the organizers of the event called everyone together and they said, who painted this and how dare you've done that? That is terrible. How dare you paint a woman with purple lips and yellow cheeks and green hair and red eyes? How dare you do that? Now we see that today and we think, oh that's nice, oh that's nice, that's a bit of pop art, I don't know, it's a bit of modern boutique style. That's actually, I could see that in my house, right? But you go 120 years ago, you painted like that, this would have happened. This is what they called him. They said, this was done by a beast. How dare you paint a woman like that in this color palette and in this style? You're a beast. Now what's interesting, have you ever heard of an art movement period called Fauvism? Now if you didn't know, Fauvism is the shortest movement in art. So you know you have the Renaissance back in the day, and you have Impressionism, and you have Post-Impressionism, and then you have Surrealism, and you have Cubism. All of these are movements. You have pop art and all of that. Fauvism was a period 1903 to 1907. Fauvism is a word that comes from that of the Fauves, which translate into that of a beast. And they called him a beast for creating in this style. Therefore, by painting artworks, this style created the art movement. But what is so important about this, had Matisse not been ridiculed and taken it and said, well, it's okay, I get it, but this is my new style, had he not taken the leap of doing that, he would not have broken the rule of art, and he would not have set a brand new foundation for new artists to paint on top of that. I love talking about Peter Max. He's one of my top recommendations. Absolutely adore his art. I like talking about Create. I love talking about Andy Warhol because this is the art that I enjoy. Okay? But none of them would have had the freedom to create their style had this guy not done this. Not a single one of them. Had he not done this, perhaps Andy Warhol and Miro and Dali 40, 50 years later would have been called a fauve. A beast for creating artworks in this style. Do you see the importance of these artists? I'm going to pause there on Fauvism for the moment, but I want to now say what's happened is he went back and I could just imagine Gertrude Stein saying to him, okay, well, you know what, maybe you should change it up a little bit, you know, that didn't go down that well, but work with it, good job, young lad, try something else, but work with that, but let's see how it goes, keep going. And he created an artwork called The Blue Nude. Now, was that person laughing at something? Anyway, he created The Blue Nude. Now what's interesting, this artwork upset Picasso terribly because he hung this right next door to the artwork of Gertrude Stein. Let me bring your attention to the following, why Picasso was upset. Look at the face, and look at the face. Can you see the similarities? But what he's done is, he's used the blue period that Picasso had done in his artworks. He'd used The Rose period, that pinkish Valentine colors, I call it. Can you see that? And he pretty much captured all of Picasso's periods in one style. Picasso was not very happy. And he said the following to him, very tongue-in-cheek, very politically correct, in a nice way. He said, Picasso said to him, this is neither design nor is that woman that we think, or I think that Matisse needs to choose. Does he want to paint a woman or does he want to design items? But what he's got doesn't work out together. But why this is so important? Picasso created that, Matisse created that, in opposition to this, and in opposition to that, Picasso created that. Called Les Demoiselles d'Avignon in 1907. He had to do something to shake the world and to shock people, to take the attention away from the blue nude, to say, look how awesome this is. But this artwork didn't see the light of day from 1907, when it was created, until 1916, because it was so forward-thinking. Now imagine, just 4 years before this, Henri Matisse was called a beast for painting a woman in that weird color palette we've seen. Imagine now you do this just 4 years later. There's a possibility Picasso, his artworks, his studio, and himself may have been put on fire. The artwork is called originally Les Demoiselles de Bordel. I don't think I have to translate that. Okay, you have the idea. Which depicted certain, how shall I say this on stage? Shall I say, I don't know, activities, you know, paid for activities and individuals. And this is not something that you painted. You can't sketch that. You can't paint that story and tell that and show that to the public. How dare you? But Picasso said, I don't care. But he was scared. 9 years it was hidden until an art advisor said to him, you know what, show it, but you need to change the name. You can't call it Les Demoiselles, the ladies de Bordel. You have to call it Les Demoiselles d'Avignon. That sounds a bit better. Why this artwork is so intriguing for us as well is that we think this artwork is probably the very first official Cubist artwork. But we see how it captures every single one of Picasso's periods, the African mass primitivism period in the faces. You see the Rose period, you see neoclassical, there's some fruit bowl over there, you see the blue period, and all of that. By the way, I realize as I say neoclassical, I never elaborated earlier on the neoclassical period in Naples. I was talking about the museum too much. Pompeii. Neoclassical means everyday life. Bowl of fruit, someone slicing a loaf of bread, something captured in everyday life. And we see all of this captured together. And why this is so important? It's probably the very first Cubist artwork ever. Because we see from this point forward, when this was shown, 1916 for the first time, developing in this style, in this method, until Cubism really became a thing in 1921. Now what's very interesting here is I want to talk about something else. How many of you are familiar with the artwork called Guernica? Just a wave, just a few people, one person, okay? Guernica is probably, next to Les Demoiselles d'Avignon, the most important artist or artwork in the world. Now, art is an opinion, right? That's my opinion. And I'll elaborate on you a little bit why. Created by Picasso. This artwork depicted the physical and emotional aftermath of war. Amidst world wars, 1936, he was given a commission between Spain and France, because he's Spanish living in France, to say to him, we want you, as one of the famous people in the world, as an artist, to create an artwork, a commission piece, to show to the rest of the world that Europe is the art central. But remember what I said at the beginning of this talk. Picasso not once created anything without inspiration, without influence, without story, without need. He's never someone who would just create an artwork and say, I'm going to have a cup of coffee now, and maybe I'll just draw a chair Or maybe I'll just sketch a guitar, that's what I feel like. No, he needed inspiration. October, the commission of this, imagine this is a blank canvas. Imagine a blank canvas, pardon me. They commissioned him to create a blank canvas, something wow, something extraordinary. He didn't find anything to create. About March 1937, he opened the newspaper. This is 6 months later. Opened the newspaper, have a cup of coffee, I can just imagine it. And he looks at this and he sees photos of a city called Guernica. Does anyone know, a bit more familiar with the story perhaps? No? A city called Guernica in Spain. Flattened. It looks like Pompeii. There is nothing left. Nothing. It looks like scenes what we see today happening between Russia and Ukraine. And as I started doing this talk last year again, after the predicament with Ukraine and Russia, I started realizing the close similarities of Guernica back then in the day. Because if you study what happened is Franco, the leader of Spain in the 30s, commissioned the Nazis to create a special bomb for their war efforts. The purpose of the bomb was to evaporate people. And they created the incendiary bomb, which goes against today the rules of war, which is exactly what Russia is doing. The same method, and that's where that was invented there. Franco then said, well, we need to test this. He said, take that city in my country called Guernica, take that city tomorrow morning, 9 o'clock, go and bomb. We won't tell anyone. It's a test site. They specifically went and bombed hospitals, schools, churches, buildings of archaeological importance, which typically in the rules of war typically is not items that should be touched, because war is about shaking a government, not about ruining the people, right? It's government. Although it ruins people. The result is the same as what the intention isn't supposed to be. Interesting, right? And then they came afterwards, and people who were running, and they shot the individuals down. Terrible experience. It shocked Picasso to the very core of his being. I can just imagine, in the next 6 weeks, that's how long it took him to create that artwork that depicts the physical and emotional aftermath of war. 6 weeks, I can just imagine him, and he's 5'4". Let me show you how big that artwork is. But in fact, let me show you the size of the artwork. That's what it looks like. Size. 7.8 meters, 25 feet tall, long. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7.8. That is the length of that artwork. I'm 6'5" tall. That artwork is 11'5", nearly 2 of me tall. That's a big artwork. For a 5'4" artist, I can imagine him putting his cup of coffee down, immediately running to his studio on that life-size canvas, taking his charcoal and his pencils and starting and chalks and to create that artwork. And it inspired me to wonder, how did he do it? I then had probably the best idea I've ever had in my life. I took that image and I put it in my computer and I inverted the colors. Have you ever done that? If you invert the colors, you see totally opposite colors than you would have expected. And I inverted it, and that's what I got. For the moment, I can see how he created first this bull, and a light, and the horse dying, and the lady with a lamp, and the lady suffering at the hand, and the soldier dying, I can see all of that for the moment. How he's done that. 6 weeks. This artwork was created, it was in the Sophia, I never get the name right. There's a museum in Madrid called Sophia something museum in Madrid. And it was up there, and the Nazis had sent some soldiers to go and investigate because word had spread of this artwork that carries this powerful message against war, that encouraged people to stand up and not to keep quiet. And there was a Nazi leader or a captain or whoever they were from the SS, their special forces, said in front of this massive exhibition, who did this? I need to know now, who did this? And Picasso stood up in front of everyone and he said, "You did." He didn't care. You need to realize that at this point in time, Picasso was probably the only artist still in Paris at the time. Every other artist, different countries, they either fled to New York or to Israel back in the day, the majority of them. And Picasso, if you read the book called Life with Picasso, you can find it on Amazon. I get nothing for saying this. It's a $9.99 book. It describes in detail the life of Picasso. It was published for the first time in 2003. And it was by one of his wives, who wrote in detail all of this. And you're going to read a beautiful life story in absolute detail. And I recommend, if you like reading, if you like art, go and get this book. It's the best $10 you'll ever spend. And it was this artwork, just to give you an idea, it was so important that in 1991, when the United Nations got together in their grand hall, wherever they meet, whichever country it is in, they had a life-size tapestry of this artwork behind a curtain unveiled when the United Nations, all the countries a part of it, decided how involved they will be with war efforts in each other's business. This was unveiled at that event. What is very interesting, as a reminder, right, as a reminder, what is interesting, about 2 years ago, there were recent meetings held about each other's involvement, and this was all about 2 years, last year, about the Ukraine and about Russia. Guess what happened? In the United Nations, they pulled the curtain closed. They closed the artwork in most recent United Nations discussions. Just put this into perspective. Go and Google, see what I'm telling you is happening. The message of the artwork is so powerful. It can make things happen, or it can stop things happening. I want to just take some of those artworks, of those images in that artwork, and I want to tell you what the meanings are. So I'm not going to go through because there's a lot happening. But I want to give you a detailed input into the meaning of Guernica. And I bet you by the end of this talk, and I'm talking about 15, maybe 10, maybe 15 minutes ago, you will no longer say, my child can paint like Picasso. Your mindset would have changed. And I'm guessing by now already it may have, for those who feel like that, or have said that. He wanted to bring light to the reality of war, so he drew a light. The light also looks like an eye that says see, but it also looks like an explosion. He then drew a bull that represents fascism, brutality. He then drew a soldier, a dead soldier, with a broken knife. It means our militaries have lost. But what's interesting, and I think this is the one that shocked the Nazis, is that in the hand of the soldier, there's a flower, which means there's a message of hope. The flower is still alive. A bird, a dead dove falling from the sky, a message of the broken peace. Another message, a lady with a lamp, the people looking at the massacres of what is happening, the suffering caused by specific governments. We're talking about a Picasso artwork that delves so incredibly deep into the emotions, into the realities of mankind, which is why what I'm telling you, you are looking at Guernica as probably one of the most important artworks mankind has ever seen. This is going to be the last one I'm going to show, because otherwise we'll be sitting here until tomorrow. Do any of you mind sitting about this talk until tomorrow? That's when you say, no, Chris, of course no. Okay. The symbol of war, the burning lady. This image was so powerful that over the last few decades, a lot of the times when people were protesting on their picket signs, protesting against gun use, against war, there were signs with no words, just this image. A person burning at the hands of someone else's use of guns, effects of war, and so on. This is all in a Picasso image. And you see how the whole image starts to begin to fit together. I'm not going to go through everything else. Today what you see, I know someone's taking a photo, so I know maybe you missed that one, I don't know. Got it? Okay, good. The next screenshot after that is a photo from the Park West Gallery Museum in Michigan. Has any of you ever been to the Park West Gallery Museum in Michigan? Anyone been? I recommend for you to go. Next time you go to Michigan, it's in Michigan because that's where the owner is from Southfield, Detroit, and very much homebound. And developed this gallery, 1969, over 54 years. Today, we are officially, and this is a big claim to make, the biggest art dealer in the world. The biggest at what we do. So for those of you who's going to come to the auction tomorrow, come to the art gallery later, some of you may have already collected artworks with us, whether it was a $500 or $10,000 or $20,000, doesn't matter, or $100,000, doesn't matter. You know that you are in good hands, okay? And that's a photo from our gallery. These images that Picasso created, lithographs of, it depicts individuals Picasso met on the streets of Barcelona in his youth. This in our museum, look at these ceramic works over here. Those of you who ever, how many of you have ever said, Chris, I don't have any more wall space? Right? Yeah. Oh, I've heard that so many times. But then I really don't have any more wall space. Go for with ceramic work, okay? But, you know, can I ask you a question? Before I go to the next slide, we're just about almost done. We've got 3 slides left. How many of you have ever considered that there's a remote possibility that you may actually own a real Picasso? Just think about that. And the question I like to pose to everyone is, if we spend money on a nice car, because that's what we work for, and we spend money on whatever we enjoy, that's what we work for, right? Just to take care of ourselves, take care of our family, to come and to purchase things we like. That's why we work hard, right? Why not get a Picasso? How many people, out of all the things you have, how many people have similar items to you? A similar ring, a similar earrings, a similar special something, a similar vehicle, little bit this, little bit that different, but it's similar. How many people can actually say, you know what, I have a Picasso? Put this into reality. And then, in a generation or 2 from now, you and your children and their children will be able to say the following. Even though on paper you're the owner of that item, you will be able to say, you and them are a caretaker of history. You have an item that should be in a museum. The Vallard Suite, very interesting. It's a series of 100 etchings that was commissioned by Ambroise Vallard. So Picasso walked into Ambroise Vallard's gallery and he walked up and he said, you've got a beautiful artwork there, an original painting by Paul Cézanne and another beautiful painting by Auguste Renoir. I'd like to buy both of them. And Ambroise Vallard, this art dealer, said to him, yeah, they're for sale, but not to you. I will make you a trade. If you want them, take them now, but I want a trade. I want 100 etchings, because he wanted to create prints of those etchings. The idea was to put them in books and sell the books to art dealers and art collectors and artists to have something by Picasso. And they were in 2 books. The one book, I think, was an edition of 92, and the other book was a slightly bigger format, an edition of 110. So just over 200 prints were only ever done, etchings of these, ever. That's it. So what happened is he created, he said, okay, I'll do it. But Picasso knew that since, this is 1937, but from 1931 to 1936, he already had a batch of etchings. He didn't know what to do with them. 96, so he said, yeah, okay, I'll do 4 of those, will be of you. How does that sound? He knew that Ambroise Vallard was a vain man. He's not going to do self-portraits of you. He said, yeah, deal, shake a hand, do it. A couple of weeks later, deliver the etchings. Very interesting story. He takes the etchings, he puts them in the back of the car, in the shelf of the back window, and his chauffeur, of Ambroise Vallard, and his chauffeur drives off, and something happens, and he needs to slam the brakes on. Slams the brakes on, And these very same Picasso copper etching plates hits him in the head and he dies in a car accident by Picasso artwork. That's how the art dealer, yeah, true story. Who would have thought? Think about that. And these artworks were then, if you read the book, you will also see that Picasso back in the day charged 5,000 Swiss francs then in 1937 per signature. If you wanted him to sign anything. To put it into perspective, he went to a restaurant and he had a lavish restaurant, him and all of his friends, and the owner came up to him, and the owner of the restaurant said, "Sir, as a Picasso, I tell you what, I'll make you a deal. This meal is yours on the house if you just sign this napkin for me." And Picasso said to them, "I'm not buying a restaurant, am I?" And he paid for the meal. Because he knew he was selling 5,000 Swiss francs then, nearly 100 years ago, 90 years ago. These artworks were then collected, these 100 copper etching plates, by a well-to-do young individual who purchased the estate of this famous art dealer, including these. He realized these Picassos, he was so excited about Picasso artworks, so they weren't signed. He went to Picasso and he said, "Well, I want them signed, can you sign them?" And Picasso said, "No problem. I'm signing 10,000 Swiss francs a piece." Because Picasso felt done in where he could have purchased those two paintings for a much cheaper price for the value of 100 etchings. Think about it. And so he said 10,000 Swiss francs, just a matter of principle. That's why today, when you go to the British Museum, anyone from England over here? When you go to the British Museum, they have the full set of the 100 etchings unsigned. You go to Park West Gallery Museum. Now, we don't have the full set, but the ones we do have are original signed. The few that individual then went to pay 10,000 Swiss francs for. So today, when someone comes to me and they say, "Chris, why are you charging me $350,000 to $500,000 for a hand-signed Vollard Suite etching?" My answer is, well, just the signature cost 10,000 Swiss francs 90 years ago. Let's talk about inflation and availability. That's why. Think about it. 1937, Picasso created for the first time ceramic artworks. What's the name of the Madura? Anyone ever heard of Madura pottery plant? Very famous for their white earthenware, clay, and pottery works. And he went in for an exhibition, and he met the owners, and they said, "Wow, it's lovely, we like your art." He says, "I like what I'm seeing." They said, "Use our facility for free, as long as the ones you make, we can sell them." I believe it's only about 360 or 380, one of the two different images ever created in pottery, in ceramic style. We've got two of those in the gallery downstairs. You can buy them, they're available. But I only have one of each, the one you see is the one you get, okay? And they did them in small editions from 150 to 350 of each one. So in the entire career of Picasso, we see he's done 100,000 different images, different prints. He's done over nearly 40,000 illustrations, nearly 20,000 paintings, but the ceramics, 380, in fact, are some of this is the smallest oeuvre of work he's ever done. So I want for you to come and have a look and come and join us. This is an example of some of them. In fact, we have one very similar to this. It's similar to this one, isn't it? That one? It's not that one. It's very similar to this one. I can't see from the angle. And there's some close-up images of the ceramic works that may be available to you. And then in 1968, at the age of 86, he created probably the last and most important season of work in his career, where he created 347 etchings. It's called the 347 series of artworks, where everything that he was too shy, that he didn't say, "I'm going to show it, I'm not going to do it," that he put in his mind, he put it on artwork, and he said, "I'm not going to care." So just 3 years before he died, he did create that. So that were the last major seasons of the work of Picasso. His personal life, he was married several times. He held many mistresses. In fact, in the book, The one lady that he met, he met her at the age of 37, and she was just, I think, 18 or 19. And she was so enamored by his red tie, and he just said to her outside of a corner shop store, he said, well, you're really lovely, there's something about you, I feel we can do great things together. And they did. They spent most of their life together, and she became an artist inspired by him. And she was the one that was typically great in his artwork, Marie-Therese Walter. You see typical Roman nose, the big bust. Every time you see that, that was her being featured. I'd say about 60% of the times he was art. He had 4 children with 3 women. He died in April 8, 1973 in Mougins, France. And even though Picasso was never ever known to give a compliment to another artist, he did say the following. I do like, what did he say? I don't necessarily think that Paul Cézanne is a great artist. However, he purchased a Paul Cézanne, okay? And then he said, but he did have a good a good mastery of the use of color palettes, and I'd like that. And should I be able to die one day and be buried somewhere of choice, it would be on the land where Cézanne created his artworks. It's the only compliment that's known out there. Ladies and gentlemen, did you enjoy the talk? Was it okay?
Yeah.
Did you meet the minimum requirements or expectation of Picasso here today? Excellent. Thank you for joining us. Lovely having you with us. So tomorrow morning I'm doing a talk here at 10 o'clock. It's all about Masters of Metal. So our team, Ruben, if you guys will help us to have some artwork set up for that tomorrow, metal work, it'll be great. And it's only going to be 30 minutes. We'll show you a little bit of talking and an artist interview video. A little bit of talking, artist interview video. It's really quite fun actually. And you learn so much, and then that's followed by the auction preview at 12:30. This room is going to be jam-packed with artworks. How many of you were at the first auction this cruise? Any auctions this cruise so far? Only 2. And where were the rest of you? What's going on here, all right? We would like you to join us tomorrow. Come and have a look. We're going to have nearly 200 artworks out here tomorrow. And the auction starts 1 p.m. And I have $1,000 credit available. Should anyone come and speak to me about the Picasso ceramic works, because yes, they're more than $10,000 a piece, and yes, the one is probably $50,000 a piece, okay? But should any of you be interested, I have a legitimate $1,000 to someone on the proviso that you are a brand new customer to Park West Gallery. If you're a brand new customer to Park West Gallery, I have $1,000 for you towards the Picasso artwork. Thank you, everyone. Enjoy the rest of the day. And as you leave, my colleague Ruben in the back has a complimentary free work of art for you and an itinerary of the rest of the events for the art happening rest of the week. Have a great day, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Alison. Hi, Alison. How are you?
Hello, aloha.
Aloha indeed.
Aloha to all of you as well. It's so wonderful to see your faces. This has been an amazing experience thus far, and I'm not done yet.
No, not at all. This is just the beginning, really, of a different little... What is this?
It's an aloha for you, but unfortunately, you're so tall. You'll have to.
Mahalo, thank you so much. Isn't this lovely? That actually smells real.
It is real. I picked it up on our last stop, and I don't know who made it, but with love in their hands, for
Well,
sure.
thank you so much for passing that on to me, because I've never actually been to Maui myself, and obviously not being off in the last couple of islands either. So thank you so much for bringing this on for me.
You're very welcome, Crystal.
I really appreciate it. But you know, let's head on over this way. Let's take a little seat here, because a lot of you might not realize this, but Alison has offered to give up a little bit of her time to come and tell a little bit of your story, right? So,
Yeah.
as a celebrity, I've never actually had a chat like this with a celebrity. I feel like Oprah. Isn't this lovely? So tell us, why on earth, being Alison Bolton, why did you choose to come on the Crown Princess and also sail out to Hawaii specifically?
So that's quite a story. I've been sailing since I was yay big, probably 5 years old. And Princess has actually been my ship of choice. Now, when I was that young, it was a different fleet. Well, they were called something else.
What were they called?
Rowboat?
Oh, a rowboat, I hope not.
It was a different brand, but Princess eventually bought this company. I guess I can use the name. It was the Fair Sea and the Fair Wind were the two cruise ships that this particular company sailed. And so my family and I have been sailing my whole life. I wanted to go to Hawaii because my brother was actually born there. And my family has a long, storied history with Hawaii. And I really haven't seen the islands, all of the islands. I know Honolulu, I know Waikiki, and I had visited the Big Island when I was very young. I remember walking actually on the volcano and feeling like the bottoms of my feet burning. We can't do that anymore. But so I thought it was time, and I have a big group of family and friends on board, and so I said, yes, let's do it. And so that's kind of why I'm on this particular itinerary.
Well, it is one of those itineraries that a lot of people wait a lifetime to come and do. So it is very special that you are sharing this with your family as well. So who specifically are you sailing with right now?
Well, it just depends on how they treated me this morning. No, I have my mother is here with me. I don't know where anybody is. And I've got some aunts and uncles, and I have a nephew, and a very close, special person in my life with me as well. And he's a husband.
All right.
So, and then some friends as well.
I really appreciate that. Now, how long have you and your husband been together?
How long have we been married?
Am I putting you on the spot there?
Yeah. No, we've been married more than 10 years.
All right, and you're still saying that he's the love of your life?
He is.
You're definitely doing something right, and I think going on cruises like this definitely helps a relationship, for sure. But I know everybody's wanting to find out as well, so with you being a young actress, how did that all start for you? With acting or modeling?
Yeah, so this is my beginning.
Oh.
I started modeling. So I was actually born in DC at Walter Reed Medical Hospital. I'm an Army brat. You'll learn a little bit about that later on. And when we lived in my dad was transferred to Presidio in San Francisco, and if anybody knows Presidio. And by the way, servicemen and women, thank you. I love you. So I actually started modeling with my brother, and you'll see pictures of him as we go along as well. And this is just when you start as an actress or an actor, you have to get composites made, and that is what your agent sends out so you can audition for commercials, television, film projects. I was a dancer, singer. Tap was my favorite dance of all, but I got very serious actually with ballet. And I got to the point in my life where I actually had to choose between becoming a professional ballet dancer with the New York City Ballet or staying with acting. I chose acting. I think I did the right thing. My feet still look okay. So these are some of my beginning years of my photos. And then as we transition, and I put this together for this presentation. This is actually the first presentation I've ever given about my life. So I hope it's interesting. It actually, for me, going through this, it was very cathartic. I didn't realize, you don't step back and really look at yourself sometimes, you know? You look at yourself today, maybe you look at a few years ago, but actually going back in your life, the stories that you have, that everyone has, it's incredible. And so from here, let's see where I went. Allison, tell me.
All right.
All right, so this was one of my first television commercials. And as you can see, I'm my little ballet dancer self. And this, I was very fortunate to work with Orson Welles. And when I worked with him, wow. First of all, I was really tiny. I was a very small child. And he was quite, what do we call him? Oh, well, he had a presence.
That's a very polite way of saying it, I think.
So I was so nervous. I knew the significance of his background and his importance in film and the theater. And so when I first met him, when I was on set for the commercial, I was just shaking. I didn't know what to say, and I was like, oh, Mr. Wells, I'm so happy to meet you. And he looked at me and was like, oh, I can't do his voice, I'm sorry. But he was like, oh, my little ballerina, we will have a wonderful time today. And I was like, oh. So then that's when I did my little jump. And this was for Vivitar camera. So that kind of was the beginning of my film career.
Now that's quite incredible, but I have to ask as well, you said that you had to make that very big decision going from dance and choosing to go into a full acting career. Where was that pivotal moment for you? When did you realize that you wanted to go all into acting?
So what happens when you're a dancer, at least for females, and I'll just say it, is we change as we get through the preteen years to the teenage years. And I could, I obviously had the build to become a prima ballerina and the talent for it. But it was challenging because that meant I had to leave my family. And I mean really leave my family. They came and they said, well, we're going to take you to New York and you will not be with your family for years. I was 13. My family's everything to me. I couldn't do it. And I was in Los Angeles then. At that time, my family was in Los Angeles. And I chose acting. I love both, but I chose acting because I could be with my family. And I knew they'd take care of me. Because the industry is very challenging for children. I don't put feathers on it. I don't put, glitter dust. It's incredibly exciting. I loved it. I still love it. But it is very challenging. And if you don't have that support system in the arts as a child, it's difficult and it can be very dangerous.
It really can be. And I mean, you don't know this about me yet, but I used to be a dancer as well. So it feels almost like we're kindred spirits in a way.
Yes.
Because we definitely have that connection from the beginning, and I understand exactly what you're speaking of, because as a dancer it's very difficult to have those roots, to have your own family, and to obviously create and build on that, which is why I'm no longer dancing either. So very, very interesting.
So that means you and I must have a dance later.
Well, I'm a retired dancer. I don't know about you, Alison.
Never. Once a dancer, always a dancer.
Yeah, for sure.
So then next was my M&M Candyman commercial, which was a big national commercial. And I guess the story behind this was, again, I was able to but combine the various creative talents I had, which was dancing, acting, and singing. So this is when my singing started, because back then, I don't know if they still do this, but as children, if there was a song in a commercial, you were actually singing the song. And this was one that I laid tracks to when I was there 6.5 years old. Yeah, and I guess the funny story behind this commercial, whenever you're acting and you're eating, they don't want you to get sick. So you eat, okay, take one, eat, take two, blah, blah, blah. So they always have like a thing where you get rid of, what's in your mouth. And I refused. I think my mother was surprised I didn't turn orange, because my favorite color was orange M&Ms, and I refused to spit out the M&Ms. So I just ate. I did not get sick, and the commercial was just a heck of a lot of fun. And this was actually filmed in San Francisco at the time. So just another little piece of trivia about Alison. This was my modeling career, again in San Francisco. I became the Macy's kid. I really did. I was their child model for several years, and as you can see, I'm in every photo. And then in that one, the cover, there's my brother. In the, not the one to the right, but the one that says Summer Country. That's my brother sitting down. So he modeled with me as well. And unfortunately, I have so many photos, I couldn't find some of the really good ones, especially the one where I'm beating him up with a pillow, which was really cool. My brother's older than me. So if you're a younger sister to an older brother, I think you get what I'm talking about. We knew how to get our revenge when no one was looking except a camera.
Almost. And I have to ask, this is Macy's, the store, right?
And Macy's, the store, department store.
Do we have anybody out there who's maybe not from the United States of America? Anybody? England, maybe? Yeah? We don't have Macy's in England. No, so I honestly went to my very first Macy's just last year. I had no idea what I was walking into, and it's a dangerous place, folks. You spend a lot of money.
Yeah.
That's great. Macy's is awesome.
Yeah, it's a great store. I don't know in London, in England, well, Liberty's of London, I guess. But what would be the department store that would be, I'm blanking on the name.
Isn't it Harrogate? Harrods. Harrogate is a place, right? Harrods, I would think, would be very similar to
So it would be similar to that, yeah. And there I am, the Army brat. So like I said, I was born into a military family. My father traveled all over the world. I traveled with him as much as I could, that we could be stationed basically in the United States. To the left is me and my brother. And then to the, well actually, which side are you? Well, okay, so stage, yeah, okay, anyway. Me as Nancy, that's later, obviously. Family Magazine was one of the magazine for military families back then. And I think they're actually still in publication today. And here comes Little House. So I moved to Los Angeles, and one of the first, the first series that people know me from was Little House on the Prairie. And if you know my character, if not, I'll go into it a little bit. My name was Nancy Olson. And the story went that Harriet Olson, who was the mother of Nellie Olson and the wife of Nels Olson, they owned the mercantile in town, so they were the rich folk. And Nellie was quite a handful, shall I say. And Nellie on the show got older, she got married and to Percival and moved to New York. And Harriet was very lonely, and she didn't have a little girl to dress up anymore and play with. And so she decided to go to an orphanage. And I was one of the orphans, but I was not a very nice orphan. No, not very nice at all. So I didn't like her. I didn't like anyone. But she loved me for some reason. I don't know why. And so she looked at me, and so I punched her. And that's when she adopted me. She said, this is my Nancy. So I was adopted, and I became, there, actually, that's the photo. So that's the one, yeah, it's so, I should have like a little laser. So this was me before the transformation in the orphanage, right? This is what she did to me. And then, of course, this is my sister, Nellie, who was played by Allison, also an Allison. Different spelling. And then I slowly became the nasty Nancy Olson, and I was pretty bad. I loved getting into fights. I loved to lie. I loved to just be nasty. And of course, the question people ask is, who was worse? And I'll pose it to you. If you know the show, if you know the characters, who was worse, Nellie or Nancy? And you don't have to say Nancy just because I'm here. Who? Okay, the exit door is right there. No. Anyone else? Nellie's got it.
Nellie.
Wow. Okay. All right. Fair on. So, and Little House was an amazing show to work on. Obviously, I came in for the last few years of the show. But the show went on, I think, for 12 or 13 years, and I was on it for 3.
But I know that this is a worldwide sensation, right? So we even know about Little House on the Prairie in South Africa, which is saying a lot, to be honest, because we're always the last to hear about anything.
Thank you so much. Now, if there is anybody